What's up, dudes? I know I said in my last video that the next time you'll hear my voice, it'll actually be attached to a face, but as you can already tell, I've just wrapped up watching something I'm really impressed by, and I thought I'd let my thoughts out in a quick video while I'm still on a fangirl high. So all you guys probably know just how much I love Rick and Morty at this point, whether it's from seeing my previous video where I compare the show to one of the creator's past masterpieces, Community, or you've seen me incessantly ramble about it in my Instagram posts. Either way, it's likely you guys know I'm a huge fan, with an IQ 400, bitches! So when I saw Justin Roiland was coming out with a new show in the same style, with the same sci-fi vibe, with his voice as the main character, I was understandably both excited and skeptical. The trailer, in truth, wasn't exactly phenomenal and ended up making the show look a little too much like your generic, crass Adult Swim sitcom. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I like crass Adult Swim animations as much as the next guy, but when you're operating under the shadow of the comedic phenomenon known as Rick and Morty, you're bound to pale in comparison. And sadly, the truth with the show is that it's impossible not to compare it to its predecessor. I mean, the animation is pretty much exactly the same, the lead almost sounds identical to Rick without the throat cancer, and even the end credits use the exact same font. But with all my skepticism, I went ahead and gave this show a chance, and if there's one thing I'm significantly bummed about, it's that I didn't watch this show sooner. Not kidding, you guys, this show is actually fucking hilarious, and it's proof that Justin Roiland is precious and we should protect him at all costs. So before I dive into full-on fangirl mode and start listing off all the stuff that's awesome about this show, and a few criticisms here and there, let's quickly lay out the premise. Compared to Rick and Morty, where we follow human characters and their adventures out in space, Solar Opposites centers on a family of aliens from the planet Schlorp and their shenanigans in trying to assimilate to the ways of Earth. You see, they were living peacefully in their own homeworld until the entire thing exploded, causing all its inhabitants to flee to other planets, and, well, our leads managed to crash land in suburban Middle America. Making up this arguably dysfunctional alien family is Corvo, voiced by Justin Roiland, a cranky alien scientist who hates all life on Earth and is super obsessed with completing their mission. That mission is to watch over and protect this yellow blob-like creature known as a pupa, a genetic supercomputer that will eventually evolve to consume the planet and form a new Schlorp. But for now, it functions as a somewhat cute pet and family baby. Then there's Terry, Corvo's partner, who I guess we could say is the Morty to his Rick. Terry pretty much acts as the duo's stooge most of the time, akin to that of a fun-loving, pop culture-obsessed college kid. Think if you mixed Abed and Troy from Community together. He's not so much focused on the mission as he is on exploring all the experiences that Earth has to offer, whether that's hooking up with a bunch of people, going to dog parks, or simply binge-watching all the bad shows on TV. And lastly, you've got Jesse and Yumulak, Terry and Corvo's respective replicants, who also function as their children and as siblings in some way. I don't know, the series doesn't really fully explain it, so let's just say they're replicant siblings. Jesse is somewhat the moral center of the show, with a lively, optimistic perspective on humans and their way of life. This is in stark contrast to Yumulak, who's far more cynical on the human race and is willing to pull a shrink ray on anyone who dares piss him off. So I'm gonna first start out with the bad in this show before diving into all the good stuff that I hope in the end will convince you to binge all 8 episodes. Don't worry, there really isn't much to complain about. But, as you're probably already thinking, the series seems to rely on the traditional nuclear family dynamics of sitcoms past, something commonly pointed out among the criticisms I've read. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. After all, it's a formula that somewhat still works to this day, and Rick and Morty has explored the family unit a bunch of times since its earlier episodes. But this takes me to what I think is probably Solar Opposite's greatest weakness, and that's its reliance on the familiar. We've already got the same exact animation style as its far more popular sibling, down to the certain expressions they make and their buttholes for pupils, which I have to admit made it super hard to shake off the comparisons at first. I couldn't help but feel this weird dissonance between me watching this new show completely unrelated to the Rick and Morty universe, and it looking exactly like something out of the Rick and Morty universe. It also didn't help that Justin Roiland as Corvo sounded way too similar to Rick.
Now that I'm better than you, I'm going to become the greatest magician of all time, and you will collectively be portrayed as the first wife who didn't believe in me in my biopic.
I think this is probably my biggest gripe, however petty, with the show. Rick's voice is just way too iconic, and hearing a more distilled version of it in a completely new and unrelated character was hard to grasp at first. To top that off, he's also this obsessive scientist with a knack for otherworldly, high-concept sci-fi gadgets, albeit a less intelligent one. And then of course you've got the plot lines, and on a completely objective level, they just aren't as deep or I guess as innovative as those in Rick and Morty. With that show, we get to explore other worlds, other races, hell, even other timelines, with a fine dose of unique, complex sci-fi concepts, which makes the show completely stand out among other adult-oriented cartoons. And sure, in Solar Opposites, you get a glimpse of what the planet Schlorp and Schlorpians are all about. You just can't form a serious sentence with those terms. But the series ultimately revolves around the somewhat domesticated lives of these aliens on Earth and hasn't really expanded to more ambitious territories, like, say, exploring planets controlled by hive minds or face huggers, or the depths of a micro or mini or tiny verse. It also doesn't pack as much of an emotional punch as Rick and Morty. Themes aren't as complex or as deep beyond the whole fish out of water story with these aliens trying to find their place on Earth. At least, not yet. While the episode stories start out relatively safe, compared to its predecessor that is, the show gives us a hint of a far more absurd, ambitious, and eccentric sitcom beyond its familiar first impressions. And with that, I'm gonna dive into all the good stuff now that make the show a worthy experience in its own right. A lot of the derivative and familiar concepts it plays around with are easily made up for by a particular running subplot in the show that I'm not gonna get too much into. All I'm gonna say is that there's a particular moment in the show that actually escalates into its own well-deserved epic aside the main plot and grows into something truly unique, unexpected, and honestly compelling. And it's where Justin Roiland and McMahan's writing talents truly shine, and in one particular episode even brings forth the heart and emotional depth that Rick and Morty is known for. What's ironic is that it isn't even the primary story. Don't get me wrong, the show does become increasingly serialized with the plot and characters undergoing significant development as the season goes on, but this side plot is definitely the one I'm keeping my eyes peeled for in season 2. I mean, I guess this gives the writers space to experiment with more eccentric, monster of the week hijinks with our main characters while keeping audiences hooked through a side overarching storyline. But on the subject of its main story, the fact it relies on the tried and true sitcom formula of family dynamics, akin to that of Family Guy or The Simpsons, does give it a tamer, more risk-averse feeling compared to that of Rick and Morty. But honestly, on its own, it's still an incredibly clever, fast-paced, entertaining, and thoughtful show with a ton more subverted tropes and innovative ideas compared to most animations or even sitcoms in general. I know I've been drawing a bunch of comparisons to Rick and Morty so far, which I admit is pretty unfair, considering the series attempts to lead its own unique story, but it really just can't be helped with all the striking similarities, from the animation aesthetics to the actual writers. Couple that with the fact that the show is likely to gain most of its traffic from the Rick and Morty crowd. But taking these inevitable comparisons out of the picture, you're still in for a pretty wild experience with Solar Opposites. The show mainly takes place on Earth for now, but you've got your absurd, creative sci-fi elements. Each episode packs in a whole bunch of fast-paced, hilarious events that keep you glued to the screen while maintaining a cohesive story. And the show offers us a generous helping of irreverent jokes, pop culture references ranging from the mainstream to the surprisingly niche, and a ton of incredibly graphic, gory action, which is always a fun time for the family. Gotta thank Hulu for giving Roiland and company the freedom to get as crazy and as risque as they want to be. And it'd be a sin to review the show and not applaud its greatest strength, which is really that signature Roiland humor. Both him and McMahan are never out of wit with their character dialogue for each episode, with the script organically weaving in this rapid-fire snark, sarcasm, and pop culture jabs, coupled with a ton of sight gags and absurd yet hilarious characters. The show offers non-stop creative and clever comedy throughout its entire 20-minute runtime, which ultimately is all I really need to enjoy a sitcom. Innovative storylines and existential themes are a bonus, but above all else, if an animated comedy manages to be consistently funny and engaging throughout its episodes and seasons, I think it's hit the mark. And this series excels in that department while still managing to have compelling dramas and scientific themes in between. Probably not as polished as Rick and Morty's, but still fantastically put together as its own show. So for those who are unsure if Solar Opposites is worth getting hooked, trust me, you won't regret watching it. It's a lively, action-packed, laugh-minute sci-fi romp that's bound to get even crazier with its already ordered and upcoming season 2. Actually, since recording my voice for this video, it's been announced that it's actually been renewed for a 3rd season. So yeah, pretty awesome stuff. It certainly has the potential to offer us more in terms of its themes and story development, and it won't exactly make your IQ jump by 100 points just yet, in the same way Rick and Morty has with many of its viewers. But season 1 is an incredibly fun time with better written humor than most of the stuff airing today, and I wholeheartedly believe that Roiland's got himself a new hit on his hands. The entire season is now currently available on Hulu, and given its short episode runtime, the whole thing's an easy binge. Trust me, you're likely gonna watch one ep after the other. Sadly, it was dropped just as the second half of Rick and Morty season 4 aired, and I think that's what drained it of its more well-deserved attention, so go give it some love. Anyway, that about wraps up my second video in this series, and I'm honestly enjoying how chill and quick it is as a format, hoping I've convinced at least some of you to check out clips of the show because it's seriously a treat. I've currently got a pretty big video in the works, so hope to catch you guys soon with me actually in front of the camera this time. Till then, check out the series and other stuff in my catalog so far if you'd like. I'll see you guys in the next one, and all hail Justin Roiland.